Hi, everybody. I'm Grace Brubeck, and this is the Awakening in the Heart Retreat. And this session is with John Burney. Hi, John.
Hi. Good to see you today.
Hi. And hi to everybody who's watching. I just want to say maybe one little thing. In the opening session, I was talking about delighting in the many flavors that awakeness takes, and that's a really a typical expression of heart awakening in the manifold, in the variations, in the many, in however life shows up. There's a delight in that. And I have to say, I really delighted in John Burney when I found him through his YouTubes. His name was mentioned to me by one of you who've been following these online events. And thanks, Kimberly, for mentioning John. And your name was also mentioned by other people. So when I watched your YouTubes, John, I just found you delightfully playful and also very very informed by your background as a healer and therapist. And my sense is that this is also something that bringing in the healing aspect, it's something that is typical of people who have more of a heart-centered approach to awakening, as you call it, because the others, they can't be bothered. It's if it's all about just waking up, the details of how life actually shows up just don't matter, which is also fine, but my sense is that when you're more in a heart mode of teaching and working with people, the healing aspect actually comes in very centrally. So I was really delighted to see that expressed in you in your way, in your particular way, your beautiful way. So thanks for joining us,
Oh,
John.
it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to be here with you today.
Yeah. So, John, let me ask you, just to start off with, you call your teaching a heart-centered approach to awakening.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you tell us what that means to you?
Sure.
How you would
Well,
describe it?
yeah. Well, I think that it's so many practices that I've been involved in, and approaches lead to what we call awakening, which is, and there are many descriptions of what that is. And I think it can be anything from a glimpse of our true nature, which is not our personal identified reality, but more an expanded, connected reality. And I think that once people tap into that or have a glimpse of that or have a sense of it, there's a longing to fully realize that possibility. And in my own case, that first awakening happened at a young age, sort of unbeknownst to me, very young, 16, and led to doing many, many years of intensive practices, and originally in the Buddhist tradition, both Zen and Vipassana. And then I became close to my first really deep teacher, I would say, Jean Klein. And for me, there was eventually a full shift into being that presence. And so the way I like to describe it is that awakening is actually the beginning of life. It's actually the beginning of finding out how to be fully human. And the way that progresses is through understanding how to do what I call human work, which in many ways, for many people, is how to allow what's been held back in their bodies, in their hearts, to really unwind and release and integrate. Because as one brings those into attention, and especially in a concentrated field like satsang or in a personal work, or even a gathering like this, there can be a tuning into or a resonance with that deeper essence that we are. And I find that many people think that so-called awakening is sort of, that's it, that's the end. Yeah. Now they're done or something like that. But how could you possibly be done in an infinite, unknowable universe? I mean, how is that even? That's incomprehensible. So mostly what happens, I find, is an ongoing healing and integration of the human. So my feeling and the why I say it's a heart-centered approach to awakening is that I think that the purpose of enlightenment, the purpose of awakening, is to become a fully integrated, alive human being, which is really the purpose of life, is to live fully each moment, connected, open, loving, curious, when each moment is very fresh and new. And that, from the human perspective, actually has, for the most part, an open heart. So I think that's why I use that. And I've also found through the work in being a healer in private practice for over 35 years, that when one can actually bring a certain kind of awareness to the emotional movements, those lead to a deepening into awakening. And I think awakening is an ongoing, never-ending, wonderful unfoldment. I don't know if that answers your question, but...
Totally. And, totally to my heart's delight, actually.
Good.
Because there's this ongoing, I guess, question. I don't even know how to put this. In the more traditional Eastern approaches,
sure,
Advaita approaches, non-dual teachings, the human life simply is transcended. And whatever happens in the human life to the human is not important, it's just simply an expression of that. But that's not where that's not important, and that's not where the focus is.
Well, I think,
Yeah.
Well, that's right. And it's kind of more of a surgical kind of I think that's a very appropriate and laser approach. And I certainly had that training for many years. And I would say that it was essential in my own development to have that total focus on presence and not being focused on the human condition in a way, until I think for me, there was finally a shift into being that. But I often say that, following the awakening is often the rude awakening, which is now you get to really feel and allow your humanity to flourish in a way that maybe was never allowed to. And I think if people sometimes stay in that very narrow band of attention, they often run into trouble, actually, down the road. And so I think there's a absolutely appropriate place for that, the non-dual or the Advaita approach, to help people really realize their true nature. But once you've realized your true nature, then life begins. It's like was it I don't know who said it, but when you have the you have the canoe or the raft, and when you get to the other side, you don't need that anymore. You don't need the inquiry or whatever got you there. Here you are. It's not even There's no one who is even identified with being that. They're just being that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a place for that. But unfortunately, the way a lot of us understand things prior to realizing it isn't possibly what it is. And this is where descriptions and words really can fall short and even be very easily misunderstood. So that's why I emphasize to a large degree a very flexible mind. Being able to have to be able to question, to be able to even question one's own beliefs or one's own path, not in a sense of disempowering oneself, but more to allow the mind to be malleable and soft. And then the heart can move, then the heart's much more available. Because I think another way to answer what you originally asked was that I think this isn't always the case, but in a certain way, the way we think or the way we construct meaning actually can be a way to feel secure and actually feel safe and protected as a human being, which is normal and understandable, but can also close down the heart. Because the heart opening is one of vulnerability, is one of insecurity, and that's a hallmark of awakening. So it's a lot easier. It's harder in this one sense because it's scarier or it's more intense because there's so much energy and feeling, and people can be very overwhelmed. And people can get awakened in kind of more of a mental way. But I think often that can be very imbalanced and not integrated to the whole body and the heart. So,
that mental awakening often, that in itself becomes like a concept, and then people say, well, the person is still there. I had this moment of awakening, and it may have even lasted some time, may have lasted a few hours, a few days, or even a few months. And then the person comes back, and troubles them. And in that more traditional Advaita approach, that's seen as a problem. It's not seen as an opportunity. And it's somehow, it can even get to the point where people then question whether they really woke up.
Right.
And instead of just the way that things, that I see things, is that everything's just an invitation and an opportunity to inquire into, well, what is actually here? Is actually here? And to me, that seems typical of a heart approach, is that everything's welcome. Nothing's actually a problem. Everything is welcome.
Absolutely.
As an opportunity, as an opportunity to deepen that awakeness, to find it even where it's seemingly missing, or where it's seemingly obscured by feelings or beliefs or whatever it is.
That's why I often really encourage my students to cultivate permission to be fully human, and forgiveness, and compassion, and gratitude, because those are all heart openers, and they're also very important. Most of us, I think, have been very hard on ourselves. And are looking for perfection and are afraid we're doing it wrong, or afraid we're going down the wrong track, and there's a lot but that's all just the insecurity of the ego structure, really.
Yes.
And so I think there's often the switching back and forth as people deepen into awareness, because one becomes more and more established in awareness, in awakened consciousness, where there's going from kind of relative reality to absolute reality, and can be back and forth. And that's not a problem at all. I think that if people begin to see that that's normal, and that's actually more of a natural unfoldment for most people, rather than some instant presto, changeo, blowout.
Yes.
You know, I tell
Yes.
people that's like, you know, an acorn overnight becoming an oak tree in your backyard. That would it would just devastate the garden. You know, and often when people have very big experience like that, it can actually have a lot of physiological uh, kind of a blowback, really. So I think the gradual approaches and why so many of the practices were figured out over centuries and centuries was to entrain and to cultivate the nervous system with breathing and awareness and those kinds of things to help channel more and more and more energy, because that's what happens. And if people all of a sudden can handle a lot, you know, it can open to a lot more energy, but their body isn't ready for it, can be very, very destabilizing and very difficult. I work with that all the time with many students. And so, yeah, I think it's what you're saying is completely. It's a wider perspective, and a more humane perspective, I think. And I think we're ready for that. You know, when you look at the traditions and where they came from, and you know those time periods, so they make sense in the context of those time periods and in those cultures. But you know, we've moved on.
Yes, you know, I mean, sometimes I think of it, it's like, you know, this is a special time because for the longest time there was this division between the householder and the monk and the nun.
Right.
You know, the spiritual life and the non-spiritual life.
Yeah.
And somehow that didn't allow awakening to cross over. You know, awakening was limited to the few, to the spiritual few.
Well, that's what they thought, but it wasn't true.
Yes, but now it's like you know, even those categories don't make sense anymore.
Right.
I mean, like, you know, in my own case, you kind of lived that yourself. You were a monk for a while. In my own case, at some point, I asked myself, you know, do I really want to live the life of a nun in a you know, and really commit to spiritual life in that way? And what kept coming to me was this: not in this life, not in this life. You know, this life is meant to be lived fully, you know, fully awake and fully human, both. And so, and I know a lot of people who've kind of faced that question, and it's no longer an either or, it's actually both.
Yes, and I've worked with many people who were monks or nuns or whatever, and were living in a very, you know, kind of retreat kind of lifestyle. And that's beautiful. I mean, if you can do that, if that was, I mean, people sometimes think, well, I have to do that because you did it. And I said, no, I said, actually, everybody has their own unfoldment. And you can't follow another human being. You have to find out how to follow what your inner guidance is leading you to. And rather than being externally referenced, I mean, there's great teachers and great teaching and a lot of help out there. But I think that's what's really important, is that each person can really find out how to sort of calibrate to their own guidance system, to their own internal GPS to awakening. And everyone has that. Everyone, regardless of their background, regardless of their beliefs, regardless of any of their circumstances, doesn't matter. It's built in. It's in the hard drive.
Yeah.
So it's really about how do you become sensitive to that guidance system. And I think what's referred to as awakening is really quite simply recognizing your essential nature. That once, and that was what my teacher, Jean Klein, you know, acknowledged in me. He said, this is it, you have it, you get it, you understand it. And I thought, oh, just follow this, basically. And I did. And it's what has continually, even from 16 actually, has continually guided my life. And it's true for everybody. So I think that being able to first get that sense, and really it isn't an intellectual knowing, it's a profound knowing. And even in that, one can then go through human experiences and even get caught in reactivity or ego, as I call them, ego flare-ups, whatever, no problem. It's like, that's not, it's just more grist for the mill, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
It's more to love and forgive. And I think that as people open more, they get happier and they get more connected. And there's just this incredible fulfillment, peace, love, and belonging. All those things are just natural unfoldments. Yeah. I mean, I hear about people who say they've gone beyond the sort of humor. I'm thinking, what? Why would you want to do that here? I mean, you know, what is that song? The great words of the song, what the world needs now is love, sweet love, you know? There's never too much of that. No. But I think that's really, I think that is the big love. It isn't, I'm not talking about, you know, sort of attachment love, but I'm talking about that big love, and that's the big heart. That's really what I'm talking about.
Yes.
That the limited heart, or the human conditioned heart, leads to the big heart, just like the limited mind leads to the big mind. Because also the mind is also can be completely plugged in and channeling the depth of presence as well, of course.
Yes. Totally. Oh, I love this, John. Can I just hook into the GPS, the inner guidance system?
Yeah, sure.
And check that with you. My sense is that actually there's two questions. One is, you know, traditionally in the Eastern teachings, there's the dhyanis, the mind types, and the bhaktas, the devotional types, the heart types. And so, you know, they have quite different paths, i.e. centered on the mind and on the heart, in terms of their unfolding, in terms of their inquiry, in terms of their deepening also. And so my sense is that if you're a heart type, then somehow the internal guidance system clearly is the heart. It's the heart yearning. It's the heart kind of feeling deeply at peace, deeply at rest with something rather than something else. So somehow that guidance system, the intuitive knowing, always kind of links back to the heart. It may just be what one falls in love with, the teaching one falls in love with. Or in my case, it was a teacher I fell in love with, you know. I don't know what that guidance system would be for a mental type, because I'm clearly not a mental type. But I also take it that people who are drawn to this retreat are heart types. So, you know.
Well, it reminds me of, you know, sort of when people say they're a dog person or they're a cat person, you know, and I'm both, actually. I think I need all the help I can get, you know. But I think that it's also, for me, when I talk about the GPS, I'm really talking about what makes up the mind and the heart is actually not even, it's more profound. And I found that that I tell people that my fundamental role in being a person of support is to actually recognize when somebody, and give that feedback when somebody is actually resonating consciously on that frequency of what I would call their GPS or their true awakened nature. And sometimes it's just pure energy and there's no heart or mind at all. It's just pure consciousness, which isn't necessary. I'm not talking about emotional necessarily, but really, yeah. And so that, but I think that is the guidance system. Now, true, it's some people need, I know I have students who are working with Advaita teachings to help them really be free of their mind, because their mind is like a steel trap, you know, and it helps them, and it's very helpful. I'm very glad to see they're utilizing what's working for them. Other people really they don't want to hear a bunch of words. They don't want to hear a bunch of
Mhm.
talk. They want to get into their bodies. They want to get more visceral, more kinesthetic, more in the breath. And then others are really working through it through a very healing process. Because I find that when people come into this presence, come into the field, into a stronger field, whatever needs to move in them is going to start
Yeah.
moving. So it may be mental
Mhm.
stuff starting to come out. It may be emotional stuff. It may be physical stuff, energetic. The
Mhm.
unfoldment could happen in a lot of. It could be visual. It could be a
Yeah.
visual kind of transformation. So it's really learning how to just ride whatever
Mhm.
that movement is, and it can change. So
Mhm.
I wouldn't just, yeah. I like to. I think for me, what's helpful is to be as fluid and loose as I can around anything that sounds like a definition, or that
Okay.
anything that's going to create some identifying way. You know what I mean? I think I'm
Mhm.
a true
Mhm.
radical in that way.
You just don't want to be pinned down. Hey, let me play devil's advocate for a while here.
Sure,
And
sure.
just to be clear, from my side, when I talk about the heart, as I said in the opening sessions, for me, the heart really is a beautiful range. It's physical, it's emotional, it's energetic, and it's subtle.
Hmm.
It can just be the heart flavor of awakeness, of the absolute.
Yes.
So it has all that range,
Oh, sure.
which I find totally like perfect and beautiful and wonderful and just stunning. Um, so, so here's playing devil's advocate. So you do call your approach a heart-centered approach.
Yes, there was something else that came to mind that I wanted to share with you about that.
So when you do that, yes, awakening and deepening of awakenings, it does in at all these levels, in all these ways. We're both agreed on that. And then what is it for you that makes you call your approach a heart-centered approach?
Well,
Because you put that out, you put that on
sure.
Facebook, you put that on your website, so there must be something in that
I think
that
it's
you're
real.
willing to commit to.
Oh, sure. Well, a lot of my own movement in terms of deepening was, um, I've often shared this, is that I had the path of the broken heart.
Mm-hmm.
That a lot of what motivated me on a human level, which was really what you might call my suffering, was
Mm-hmm.
around abandonment and rejection, and just through, and not to go into all the details. I mean, one significant detail was that I was born 6 weeks early and was 4 pounds and had to be in a hospital for a month in a warmer before I could come home. And I know that that created very deep neediness and longing and, all
Yes.
of this. And so that kind of loss, there was a kind of loss, became, it got my attention. So I
Mm-hmm.
think what I'm saying there also is that your human condition, whatever it is, whatever you're feeling, can be a way to find freedom.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, I think, what Buddha meant when he was really saying that suffering leads to enlightenment, that it's actually the vehicle for it.
Yes.
So the human condition, that's why I'm saying that. Because
Mm-hmm.
as humans, what's most important is what's at the heart of the matter. And I think when it comes down to it, no matter what our orientation, when everything else is taken away, the only thing that really matters is love, really, and as a human being, because we are human beings. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we may become realized and enlightened, but we're still breathing, tender organisms. We are still human, and the essence of our human nature is really our heart. That's I think, I don't know if that gives you more of an answer. And I think that in my work with people, because the energy, what I've been told is the energy is very, very strong, it evokes often a very profound movement through the emotional body. Mostly because most people's emotional bodies are, quite frankly, constipated. They're blocked.
Yes.
And it's sort of like, it sort of rattles the cage quite a bit. And so I find that a lot of my work with people is teaching them how to allow that movement, which is very much through the heart. I guess that's probably why I call it that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I totally get that, and I'm very much in agreement with that.
And I can test
Why would we be in a human form if that wasn't also meant to wake up fully,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Full embodiment is really, it's what it's about. Yeah, awakening is the beginning of the path. It's really the beginning of discovering how to be fully realized, I'd say, fully integrated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fully.
It's such a relief. I mean, I think what I see with my students who become awakened, who awaken, is just, they're just happier. They're more fulfilled. They're just more, they're just so much more at ease. And, all that stuff isn't just weighing on them in the same way anymore.
Yes.
But who wouldn't want that? I mean, isn't that the point? Isn't that why human beings want to get enlightened? Because they're unhappy, because they're suffering? Isn't the point not to transcend being human? I mean, that's a misunderstanding of suffering. That's why the heart-centered approach is so important, to emphasize that. It's not throwing out the human, as you said at the beginning. It's not transcending it. It's really allowing it to be transformed, which is very different than making it perfect. I just want to say that because I think in a lot of religious and spiritual traditions, there's this idea that somehow you become realized, and now you're going to be the perfect human being. That's first of all, that's ridiculous. And so that's why I like to tell people that, you can continually develop and grow and evolve as a human being while you're already coursing in the perfection of wisdom, while you're already one with that perfect presence. But not to lay some concept of perfection on human, because that's actually abusive, quite frankly. And it doesn't work.
Yes.
And it actually promotes and perpetuates suffering. So.
Absolutely. I mean, this is when people say, oh, the person is still there, and they suffer with that, obviously, but somehow they still think that has to be transcended, that has to disappear.
No, it just needs to be loved.
Yes.
And accepted and held and listened to and appreciated. And because those constructs, which we call our person, are really they're like little separate identities in a way. And they're not what we really are, but they have a kind of life, really. And so when we give them full love and a really tremendous compassion, they actually can unwind and release and not run the show anymore. And actually often just completely dissolve. And what they turn into is just fullness of light. So again, another way to describe the heart approach. Very important. I think compassion for our human is essential. Absolutely essential.
Actually, more than compassion, really just appreciation. I mean, to me, there's such a delight in seeing all this, experiencing all these different ways that we show up. It's beautiful. And I wanted to just go back to something you said, John, because I think that's also crucial about suffering. Suffering, it's like a motor that drives the search. And so, there is a misunderstanding, but it's kind of understandable, given that this is our motor of looking, for who we truly are. The misunderstanding is that because we're suffering, we have to get away from the humanness, and at some point, I mean, certainly in my own experience, I had to realize that even how do I put that? There was still this subtle trying to get away from being human.
Mm-hmm.
It gets more and more subtle as things
Mm-hmm.
unfold.
Mm-hmm.
But that had to be given up too. And then, the human beingness just can be fully embraced and can be appreciated for what it actually is, which is a way of being awake and a way of letting go of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
It's the humanness that allows us to heal.
Yeah.
It's not the awakeness as such.
Mm-hmm.
It's the human aspect of awakeness that allows us to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's where the healing is needed also.
Oh, sure.
It's like the healing doesn't happen if we get away from it. The healing happens if we're willing to come back to it,
Mm-hmm.
awake and with
Mm-hmm.
love and with compassion, like you say,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Willingness to really be fully, willingness to feel it all, the
Yeah.
heartbreak, the pain, the despair, the
Mm-hmm.
depression,
Mm-hmm.
every bit of it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's why when one actually first discovers and ongoingly discovers one's true self, that vast perspective often gives one the possibility of being with the human condition in a way that wasn't possible before, because there wasn't the
Yes.
space. One was so caught in the identity and the struggle. And so
Yes.
that space gives one the really the unconditional love that's required for the healing to continue and the transformation to continue, and the integration and embodiment to continue, because there's no end. I mean, it just keeps, I think it just gets better and better, quite frankly. So
keeps going. And it's interesting because in that experience, it's like that's where the alchemy is, isn't it? Because when we're no longer just caught in, say, a painful experience, there's an ability to be totally still or totally present or totally awake or totally compassionate, and at the same time feel whatever the painful stuff is. And that's how it dissolves, isn't it? It's like,
well, it knows what
that's really all it needs.
The wisdom of our healing and transformation, all that knows what it's doing. And I think mostly as human beings, when I say human work, mostly it's learning how to get out of the way and learning and letting it do it. And not trying to control it or have some preconceived idea about how it's supposed to look or how it's supposed to be. That's why comparing to other things you've heard or read, or even your own experiences from the past, are absolutely obstacles.
Yes.
That it's really allowing that to do what it does. And there's a profound trust in that. It's not a belief. It has nothing whatsoever to do with belief. Nothing at all.
Yeah, totally.
We're really in the beautiful mystery of not knowing. It's not the fear of not knowing. It's actually it's a description of open mind, open heart, of complete availability for right now, however it is.
Yeah.
So it's very alive.
Beautiful.
Very alive.
Yeah. It's beautifully said, beautifully put.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So beautiful. So, John, since we're in this right now, let's take a moment to move to. I'd like to look at the YouTube thread and see whether there are any questions.
Sure.
And also invite people, as I'm looking, you can come on to the Hangout What I did in the first session is I reposted the link to the Hangout on the YouTube thread.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to do that.
Okay.
And John, you can just take a little break whilst I'm going over to YouTube and see what's happening there.
Okay.
Okay. So. Okay, so hi everybody. Hi Jackie from France. Jillian from Las Vegas. Lisa Sequoia from Sebastopol, California. Tichen from Ortigen from Turkey. Nuria says joining from Ibiza, Spain. Jean-Marc from Paris, France. Mats from Denmark. Claire and Mats from Denmark. Victoria from Spain. Victoria has a question, so let me start with that.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to have a feeling of wanting to die, not a physical death, but the death of something inside you? Is that awakening? Thanks.
It was the last part of that, is that awakening? Is that what you said?
Is that awakening? And thank you.
Yeah. I'm not sure I understand her question, but it's, is the desire, I think that often there is a sense, I know in my own case certainly was there, that I had to discover the truth and I was willing to die. In fact, I felt like I couldn't keep living if I didn't. So if it's something like that, I'd say, yeah, that's probably the movement towards awakening. I think that's very common. And I think actually people often have a sense that something is really going to let go. And it can be actually terrifying. It can be very frightening. So if that's what's going on there, I'd say, yes, that's the deep longing for freedom. It's within us. It's within everyone. And so that probably is right. Yeah. What would you say, Grace?
And maybe just to, well, I don't know. I'd say two things. In my own experience, as a teenager, when I was deeply unhappy, I wanted to die, but just because I was happy.
Yeah.
So, there's a wanting to die, that's a wanting to get away from suffering.
Sure.
That's not very helpful towards awakening. In fact, it kind of keeps the non-awakeness going, and then there can also be, like you say, there can be a wanting to die that is a willingness to die, a willingness to let go of everything that stands in the way.
Exactly.
And there's a kind of radical joy in that. And that's very different from trying to get away from suffering.
Sure. Exactly.
So if it's that, wow, yeah, that just can be fully embraced, and it'll do what it'll do.
True. Thanks for the question, Victoria. Is that Victoria?
Yeah, thank you. And there is another question. Whoops, I lost the YouTube thread now. Jillian Ingham, she's from Victoria.
Oh.
She had the same question, just need to hear the answer again. So I hope you heard it. Um, so Victoria says it's a feeling of letting go and feeling eerily scared. I'm not sure what that means, feeling scared. So I think she knows what she's up to. That's my sense. So just go for it.
Welcome vulnerability. Because vulnerability, fear is really, for the most part, the heart opening. And it looks like fear on the surface. But once it opens, it's joy, it's bliss, it's, peace. So.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So it's helpful not to necessarily even label what's happening. I had a student who was plagued with great fear most of her life. And she was on my retreat in Hawaii, in Molokai, and had a profound shift when she asked quite an amazing question. She said, maybe it wasn't even a question, but it was, I'm not sure how to define what she said, but it was this. She said, maybe it's not fear. And it disappeared. Maybe it's not what you think it is. That when we think it's something, we name it and we identify it, and it becomes a belief and an identity, because identity and belief are the same thing. So when you become free of belief, you become free of the identity that's restricted.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm just looking back at it. The thread, she says she feels really scared, lots of panic. I feel weak.
Yeah.
And then she says, whoops. And it can be joy and fear all at the same time.
Well, often
too, in my experience, that's what Jillian chimes in with.
Yeah, I think that often, very common, that anxiety and the fear of awakening can produce a lot of anxiety, because when we start to open, there's a natural human programming to constrict, to hold it back because it's too much, it's overwhelming, I can't handle this kind of thing. And it's like you're going to fall off an infinite cliff, or you're going to, go crazy, or you're going to dissolve. There's real fear. And the holding it back produces a kind of anxiety. And so it's learning to open and let go is a lot of what, is happening, is allowing that letting go to happen, allowing the opening to happen.
Yes.
The other side of it I want to say too, and this comes into the work we talked about with healing, is that I find that many people can access presence, but the wall they hit is usually the wall of their traumas, of the things where there's been really intense programming, negative programming, so to speak. And that healing work, and so there's many approaches that can help that, with hands-on work and energy work and healing work, and certainly this work as well, all can help facilitate those. Those are often more tenacious, but interestingly enough, I want to say this, they often are a kind of motor that actually runs the movement of awakening to freedom. So instead of rejecting the fear coming up again, or the anger coming up again, or the grief or the longing coming up again, you begin to realize, wow, the fact that it's coming up again, like in my own case when I talked about the broken heart, I realized, oh, this just means I'm going forward.
Yes.
Yeah. So you learn.
It comes back as often as it needs to, and as much as it needs to. And, it's like my sense is also at a human level, the deeper the groove of suffering, the deeper the whatever it is that has us in its hold, the more we need to go back to it, because it's like an undoing of that. It's an undoing of that grip that it has on us. And how could we do that once and for all?
It's transmuting. There really is an alchemy going on there. There's really a transmutation going on, for sure.
Yeah.
And just requires, as I say, it only requires infinite patience. That's all.
Yes. Yeah.
Hmm.
Actually, there was one thing I wanted to add, which is that, in this undoing of everything at a human level that stands in the way
Mm-hmm.
of being awake, when we're still coming more from the personal perspective. Actually, no, that's not quite true. When there is fear, there's just, it's like that really is, it's like, that you're onto something. And yes, it can be totally helpful to not label it fear. It's just a kind of, but also it can just, it can be like it can almost become like a signpost, like now we're really onto something.
Sure, of course.
Keep going.
Of course. Of
Instead
course.
of doing what fear says, which is stop, stop, stop. The signpost of fear is keep going, and then woof,
That's a good
something's
reframe.
bound to happen.
That's a good reframe.
Yeah.
My bottom line motto really is whatever works.
Yeah.
Whatever works, and if you're allowing whatever works is going to work. Whatever is working is going to work, even if you think it isn't working. And often people think it isn't working, and that's where it helps to have a good teacher to be there with you to really give you a reality check, a profound reality check, I should say. Not a limited reality check, a profound reality check.
Yes. Yes. A real reality check.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Well, it's really, it's discovering one's true nature is really, it's self-evident. It is self-evident, actually. It can't be known in the mind. Mm-hmm. It cannot be intellectually known. That's why it's hard.
Yes. 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 And in that it takes a real humility also.
Yeah. Oh,
a
sure.
willingness to not know, a kind of admission of, I don't know how to do this.
I think personally it's a relief to not know.
Yeah.
I think
comes to be a relief, comes to be a joy, as long as the motor of the personality is still running. It's kind of, it feels like that's what's needed, but as it's unwinding more and more, it comes to be a joy. It comes to be a...
Yeah, I mean, my own experience of that when it first really profoundly happened, I literally felt weightless. I literally felt like I was floating. Because this burden of knowing was just enormous. And I was, I'd read all the books and was smart and all of that. And it was such a relief to not be thinking about it anymore.
Yeah.
Then the mind can be a vehicle for creativity and exploration and discovery and learning and contribution, all the great stuff. Then it's, I mean, I tell people my mind used to be a torture chamber. Now it's my buddy, my best friend,
Yeah. Well, the mind just comes to have a place of being of service when it's needed.
Exactly.
So, John, let me go back to the to the YouTube thread.
Sure. Excuse me.
And also just want to continue to invite people again to the Hangout. If you want to come on, this is your chance to ask John a direct question. And I'm posting the Hangout link again.
I'm not as scary as I look.
Okay, there's a question from Gala. John, a part of me keeps acting like I'm running out of time
Oh.
Even though I know it's not true, I
Mm-hmm.
observe it. Also, a lifelong background sadness continues to linger. I'm
Mm.
trying to just be with it.
Well, I hear you. I mean, it'd be nice to interact with you on that one, rather than just answer the question as a question, because that sounds more like a kind of question that would really be good to connect on, and really
Mm.
tune into each other on, and I could probably give you more feedback about that. But um, hmm. I'm tuning into it now. I forgot what the question was. I'm sorry. That's what happens.
Part of me keeps acting like I'm running out of time.
Oh, yeah.
And she's also talking about a lifelong
Well, that fear is,
background.
but that's a natural feeling, I think, that how important it is to you to be free of, the struggle, the sad, whatever, to really be free of it. I think if we didn't have that, if we were just all comfortable and we're getting all our needs met, getting everything we wanted, maybe we wouldn't be so motivated. I think most of us were. I mean, I was forced into this. I didn't choose. I mean, I don't think anybody chooses this. It's not easy.
No.
I think you're forced into finding the truth. Because in many ways, as human beings, we're habitual creatures. We like our comforts and we like things. We don't want change. I mean, none of that is really. We want things to just sort of go along nicely. Understandably, I don't have a problem with that. But again, I think that when you have this feeling like, well, I'm running out of time, or I might be running out of time, that sense of urgency, as Grace was saying, it's kind of like, well, there's fear, so something's moving here. It's like it gets something to want to be fully here for it. So I think that can be a real motivator, obviously. I mean, on the other hand, it just depends on where you're coming from. If it's a more of a kind of type A sort of compulsive thing, then that also maybe that requires a different approach,
Mm.
really, where one lets go of control and wanting it to be different. So really, I think it would depend on your own energy and where you're coming from and how it's moving, to give the proper feedback for that answer. Just to be clear, I think.
Mm.
So,
My sense is that it's more like a habitual kind of conditioning that's there.
mm.
So maybe maybe what's needed is more like a question of so what if you do run out of time?
But that question has an emotional undertone.
Mm-hmm.
There's some feeling of just, what is that? Hopelessness? Is it what's the feeling? What's the real energy underneath that question is what I would ask.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make it. I mean, whatever those expressions are, it's a truth of the condition.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the real truth, but it's the truth of the condition that is trying to be free. But
Yeah.
that which wants to be free doesn't get free. That's not really. It's kind of a conundrum to understand. You can't really understand it from the separate reality.
Mm.
But what can you do? I mean, it's in terms of explaining it. I mean, I think it's limited to talk about it. Hard to talk about it.
Mm.
So if you can tune into the energy or the feeling that's underneath that communication and just let that find its way, I think relief is on the way.
Mm. Yeah, maybe there's just life wanting to be lived more fully, And the sadness speaks to that, and
Or just grieving the unfulfilled, the life not lived or the experiences not had. It's important to grieve it's important to grieve when that's appropriate,
yeah.
whether it's a loss of a loved one or an unfulfilled part of oneself that never got to be realized. Everyone has those things. As humans, most people do, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Gala, for that question. And maybe you want to come back to us on that. Meanwhile, I also just want to say, Frederick, I saw you joining the Hangout, and
Mm-hmm.
we just had to kind of come to a close with this question. So please come back onto it if you're still around. We didn't forget about you. We just had to get to you. So whilst he's back on, I'm just going to look. So Gala says, I try to unravel and resolve the sadness, depression, knowing that it's a confused perception.
Your voice broke up, Grace, so I didn't hear the question.
Oh, okay. I'll repeat it. I'd like to unravel and resolve this depression, knowing that it's a confused perception.
Well, is it a confused perception? I mean, how do you know that it's a confused perception? Because to me,
She's coming back, John. She's coming back with something.
Okay.
So she says the underlying feeling of it is, I'm not okay. I'm doing things wrong. I'm not getting it right. Life or waking up.
Life always what?
She's not getting it right either. She's not getting right life, and she's not getting waking up right either.
I'm getting some feedback on the audio. I don't know what to do.
Yes. Dennis or Denis, I'm going to mute you for a sec, and you need to, you need to turn off your YouTube. You need to get out of your YouTube page, because that interferes in terms of the sound, okay?
So can you repeat
Oops. He's disappeared. Okay.
Can you repeat the additional, that she's feeling that she doesn't get it right, and what was it?
She feels she doesn't get it right, not in terms of her life and not in terms of waking up either. She's doing it wrong somehow. She's not okay. She's doing things wrong.
How does she know she's, well, from my perspective, as far as awakening goes, you can't do it wrong. I don't know about your life, but I'm sure it's possible to have regrets, is kind of what I'm hearing. And maybe you didn't choose certain things, or you could have, and now things turned out the way you didn't want them. And so there's some regret. I understand that. But as far as awakening goes, that's not in our control. And I'm not so sure our life is in our control either. I mean, obviously we have a certain kind of choice, you might say, but there's so much in life that's unpredictable. And would it be possible somehow to look at your circumstances and have some perspective that says, even though I feel like I'm not doing it right, maybe I've been doing the best I can. Maybe even though I'm not fulfilled and I haven't gotten what I wanted and I'm not awakened, but maybe I'm doing the best I can. Because I think that perspective, which is a heart-centered perspective, by the way, is one of compassion rather than comparison and judgment. And I think that's where the healing needs to happen. That maybe you need to realize that no matter what you did or didn't do, that however that played out, truth is, you did the best you could.
Even if you did, it may be worth adding, truth is that that's actually good enough. You can trust that amount of doing what you're doing. Or, you know,
maybe
it's
it
like
brought you
John
to
said,
this,
you know, there's no getting away from it. I
right,
mean,
and it
sooner
brings
or
you to
later
that,
it'll catch up to you.
it brings you to that place where you're between a rock and a hard place, and all you can do is sit there, and then realization is possible. Sometimes we have to be backed up again against a wall before we finally allow letting go to happen. You know, again, this is really each person's unfoldment is going to happen quite specifically for them. So this is why I say the only word you need to know is yes, which is allowing, which is recognizing that it is what it is. I mean, in a way, some people call it loving what is, but I think it's really recognizing that regardless of what your attitude is, it is what it is. If you could take out if you could remove the filter of your interpretations, if you could be free of judgments, if you could be free of comparisons, if you could be free of the need to understand, what would it be? Who would you be right now without any of those filters? You know? So I think that, you know, acceptance and compassion can lead you to the place where you're free of those filters. Then you find out how to take care of yourself. Maybe it's just about how do you take care of yourself right now? When you're sad, maybe, you know, what's the best way you can take care of yourself? How can you be kind to yourself and loving and supportive of how you are and what you have, and the fact that you haven't gotten what you wanted? I think that's really important. The relationship you have with yourself while you're still in that so-called self is very important. I think being hard on ourselves only creates, what it does to the tissues, it makes it tighten up more. And that closes up the heart. So we really want to cultivate opening, not closing. So I would say watch and notice and listen and feel for what facilitates opening. And notice what causes you to pull in and tighten up. That will be your guide. You know?
Beautiful. Thank you.
Sure.
And, you know, I just want to add, this is not just for Gala, this is for everybody. You know, whatever is said in a space of space of truth, in a space of satsang, is not just said to one person, it's said to everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
of course.
You can in that what resonates with you.
You can see your words broke up again.
Oh dear.
You
can see in that what resonates with you.
Yeah,
also,
of course.
Even though what is said to a particular.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Also, there's a deeper presence that can be tuned into that's really, the words can really just be background sound. And just tuning in on that deep level is really what I often recommend if you're listening on that level, if you're tuned in or sensing on that level, just to let that sort of fill you or fulfill you.
Yeah.
We call it transmission. And we're really one in that. There isn't really you and me. And it's amazing that even with the internet and even with people across the planet, I find how incredible it is that we're actually energetically connected. Nobody can explain that. Nobody.
Yes.
Thank goodness. Yes. They're trying, but how can you measure the immeasurable? See?
But that efforts of the heart that we can be connected, even though
it is. We are. I feel that we are profoundly connected in the big heart. It's so beautiful. So beautiful.
Yeah. And just to add that Gala is actually joining us from Australia, from
Down nice. Under. Okay.
And she says, thank you for the insights. They're very helpful. Love to you all from Down Under.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you.
And John, there's another question or comment from Z, I am now. He says, I was once told that the intensity of my desire for awakening will dictate the speed at which I arrive to this realization.
I'm sorry. Well, maybe and maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah. He goes on. He goes on,
sorry.
John.
Okay.
That feeling of urgency is a blessing which gets us focused on the path.
Great. Well, then if it works, it works. That's all I have to say. Yes, well, it certainly was true. I devoted my whole life to it. And I was going on a very different track. I was planning to go to Stanford Medical School and become a brain surgeon.
Now you kind of, work with people's brains in a different way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 Truly. No, I agree. I think that
in a truly healing way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's interesting, and I just want to share this, so this is a little bit kind of an oblique reference to what we were talking about earlier about living a life in the world, kind of the realized life in the world, is that I find with my students who become awake, who are out in the world doing all kinds of things. Some of them are performing artists, some of them are, doctors and nurses and teachers, all kinds of people. And what's beautiful is that, or even in the tech world, or even attorneys, it doesn't matter what people do, but they bring that light and that energy into whatever they're doing, and it transforms it. So I think that's what the world needs, is light, more light. Not necessarily more monks, but more people in the world who are awake, just living normal, ordinary lives, but actually that radiance and that presence affects everyone in their field and beyond, actually, without even any sense of that. Because there really is no identity in that at all. None. There can't be. So whoever had that question, that yes, that drive, I think, can be, I know in my own case, it was absolutely there. That was the most important thing for me. Because I wasn't going to survive without it. I mean, I couldn't see continuing life without it. It's too difficult.
And, that's exactly what's to be trusted, isn't it?
Yes.
Somehow deep yearnings or very intense drives just arise, and that's part of our vehicle home. So how perfect is that?
Yeah. But I do want to acknowledge it can be a very bumpy, rough road. And it can be very difficult and discouraging at times. And I often jokingly say, the dark night of the soul is usually more than one night. It can go on. And to hang in there and to have the deep knowing to hang in there. And that which we are does know to hang in there, actually. So.
Yeah. And yes, it can be good to, can be good to know, can be good to hear that from people who've been through these nights, through these challenging.
I think most of us have been through it plenty. I mean, unfortunately, I don't live in memory anymore. That's gone, but I can't remember.
And of course, you also have the perspective of somebody who works with people in supporting them in those.
That's right, all the time.
So
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an incredible journey. that we're on together, really.
Mm.
And it's an amazing, extraordinary, ongoing discovery for everyone, including me. I mean, I am continually deepened and expanded by the process with others. So it's a real privilege and and an honor and a gift to be here with you.
Mm.
You know, it really it's how lucky are we?
Yes, yes. Actually, that's also a heart flavor. It's just this gratitude
Mm-hmm.
to be able to be there, service to others, and whichever way we are. I mean, like you say, it can be as a surgeon, or as an attorney, or as a mother, or as a father, or whatever, whichever way it's life calls us, or it can be as a teacher, a therapist, healer.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Any of these ways just are, um, they just will become clear, if only because that's where we are. That's what we happen to be doing right now. So clearly that's part of our path and our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And if at any point that needs to be let go of, that'll become clear too. John, you just froze, but I think you're actually back.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I don't have any more comments on the YouTube thread.
Okay.
And for some weird reason, I expected people to come on to the Hangout, but nobody seems to be showing up.
Well, I saw some people try, but I don't know what happened to them. They disappeared. I don't know what's happened. I know that I've had a little, at times your voice has gotten garbled and I didn't understand what you were saying. So maybe there's some internet challenges going on. I don't know.
Yes. Well, I know one person, he was keen on the next teacher on money. So he was just trying whether it worked. The other one, Frederick, I don't know. Frederick,
I know Frederick.
still there?
He's one of my students, actually.
Okay.
I recognized him, but I don't. He disappeared. So.
Yeah. Well, so since nothing else is happening, is there anything that you want to add, John? Or anything that you feel called to just share with people?
Really, quite simply, what I'm feeling deeply or what I'm sensing deeply right now is just to acknowledge allowing being. It feels like there's a deeper, much deeper space here right now. Whoever is listening, however it's working, and just to open to that, to give yourself fully to that, and to rest in that fullness. And maybe we could just sit here together in that silence and that presence without thinking or doing anything.
Mm-hmm. There is actually another question.
Fine. That's cool. Yeah, sure, of course.
From Gala.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a personal question. John, what is your edge of unfoldment? on the human level? What do you find challenging, if anything?
Lately I would say I don't know. Everything's good. I mean, things are good. Um, Nothing's bad. It's just everything's, life's great. I mean, it just, good question. I don't know. That's a really good question. I could have answered, I mean, some time ago, I probably could have come up with a few things, but I think recently what was challenging was just feeling like we couldn't keep up with, or just the demand for, teaching and so forth, that kind of thing. But I don't know. I don't feel any of that now. It's not even there. So, edge of human. I don't know. It's just been very enjoyable lately. What can I say?
Hmm.
Very rich, very enjoyable.
Well, it becomes more and more enjoyable,
Yeah.
It's like the edges become less and less, don't they?
I just feel that that this love and this openness just keeps, and the energy, just whatever you want to call it, just gets stronger.
Hmm.
And more wonderful things keep happening. I mean, it's just a question of how to, I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, I guess, but even that isn't even a reality. I mean, I don't even think that. It's just right here. We're just right here.
Hmm.
So it all just keeps happening.
Hmm.
And sorry, Ed.
Well, maybe this was your edge, John, because there's a comment from Nuria. She
Yeah.
says, "I feel so honored and grateful to meet you, John, in this way through this amazing tool, the internet."
Yeah.
I mean, I think you haven't done a lot of teaching on the internet, so maybe that's your new edge.
Yeah. Well, maybe, we haven't, I mean, we're kind of, we just do our thing here and just in San Francisco area and the Bay Area and some in Hawaii, but I've done some traveling and teaching, but mostly I stay here, and we're really busy. I'm so busy seeing people that just to be able, I'm getting a feedback now.
Yeah, it's from Erin. I just
Okay.
muted her mic.
Okay. Hi, Aaron. Um, yeah, I think that I forgot what I was saying. Oh, well.
You said you were going, you were
Oh,
doing teaching
yeah, that
in
were,
this
I think the
area.
YouTube videos you were mentioning earlier when we were talking before we started the online gathering, Grace, that how much you've enjoyed watching the videos. I just want to say how much I'm grateful to my wonderful assistant Lisa for doing this incredible filming and editing of those. They're beautiful, and I'm glad people are really starting to watch them and benefit from them. And we've been having the podcast going for quite a while, so I think more and more people are sort of slowly, tuning in, kind of things. So it's nice to have this opportunity, and I'm delighted that we can connect deeply in this way, even through this so-called technology, right? I don't think we even need the technology, quite frankly, to tune into each other.
No, but it helps, And actually, my experience with it is that it just opens the possibility of connecting with so many more people, all over the globe.
Yeah, well, thank you.
So maybe you want to start thinking about offering internet satsangs, John.
Yeah, we've thought about that. We haven't, we just have to technically figure that out. But I also want to thank you, Grace. I didn't do that yet. I wanted to thank you so much for inviting me, because I was really looking forward to it. I so enjoyed meeting you recently when we had our talk the other day. And it's so lovely to be with someone who clearly is on the same page and has a pretty similar resonant understanding of this beautiful path. And I really appreciate you sharing are being together with your people and the people that know you already. So I really thank you so much, and just want to send lots of love and light out to all those people out there who are listening and watching over around the world. And I'm just glad you're there doing your thing. I mean, it's so beautiful that so many more people are discovering what's important and finding their way to freedom and happiness. It's just awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky to be surrounded by people like that all the time in my work, and it's wonderful to keep meeting more and more people like you out there who are really, truly, sincerely finding your way. So it's a real privilege, and I'm so grateful and thank you. It's very deeply fulfilling to be here with you.
Thank you, John. And I just want to say I recently was in California for the first time in my life, in San Francisco in the Bay Area in Northern California. And I was just struck by the beautiful openness and lightness of the energy there. It's totally amazing. I mean, I fell in love with it. And that the thing is, though, not everybody lives there. And so
a lot of people are trying to.
and for me, the internet is one way of making the blessings available to so many more people, because not everybody has the funds to travel or the ability to travel, because they have commitments where they live.
Sure.
And the internet is one of the ways that they can connect with this energy, this awakeness. And so I've just, over the last 2 years, I've just come to love the possibility that comes with it, the very real way that people connect and are reached and reach out and participate. And it's just, I just love doing this. I mean, so
nice.
And if I can be of help to for you to offer satsang in the future on the internet, I'd be very happy.
Oh, thank you so much. We'd love that, actually. Thank you so much for the offer. We need all the help we can get, really. We're a very have a very small group of people helping, and we can barely keep up with it. So any help is greatly, deeply appreciated. Thank you for offering.
Yeah. Well, as far as I can see from my perspective, you have a lot of help already. You have a lot of
the help I have is I am so grateful. You have no idea how grateful I am. And these people I love dearly, and I am so lucky to be supported by them. And so we're all here for each other. I mean, that's how I think about it.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No,
go ahead.
I was going to say I'm all for the really good human experience. It's like, why transcend humanity when the point is to really find out how to live fully and if possible, hopefully really enjoy the great pleasure of profound being with others.
Yes. I'd say, why transcend if you can have a love fest right here and now with all these other beautiful beings. So, John, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to bring the session to a close. And Aaron, I'm so sorry we can't come to you anymore. We've just run out of time. So maybe you'll have to come to the first internet satsang that John's offering. And I just want to finish by looking once more at the YouTube comments. So Appalachian says, connecting with you is always amazing. I love to see more often on the internet. John, here's your answer. Kim says, watching from Idaho. Would love to be able to join you online more often, John.
Thank you.
And Sequoia Lisa. This was so wonderful, Grace and John. Thank you. Yes, please do more. Jackie says also, thank you sincerely for your sharing.
Nice.
And Jillian says, reassuring to tune into a sense of common bafflement and gratitude for technology. So thank you so much, John. And
you're so welcome.
This has been so delightful. I really love meeting you, and I feel that shared kind of, I don't know, heart.
I did too. It's beautiful.
Heart with you, and it's just been very beautiful. So thank you.
You're so welcome.
People really appreciated you too. I can tell from the
YouTube. You take good care, and we'll look forward to seeing you again.
For sure. Yes.
Okay.
So thank you, and thank you to all of you for watching. And I'll see you again in about 25 minutes time for the session with Unmani. Until then,
bye.
Bye.